Rocking the Cat Eyes by buggachat. Chapter 4 Kwame Dance Party. So, Nina said between bites of a sandwich, his amused gaze locked on Adrian. I heard you tried one of Alex's drinks. Adrian rolled his eyes, leaning back in his cafe chair. Don't remind me, I was sick the entire next day. Yeah, Marinette snickered. I was on care duty all day. He ducked his head a little, shooting her an apologetic smile. Sorry. She simply shrugged, shaking her head with a small smile tugging her lips. Yeah, you only got yourself to blame for that one, Alia added, pausing to take a quick sip of her drink. We all warned you. I barely even remember anything, he said. I remember accepting the drink, and then next thing I knew, I was waking up to green nails. Speaking of, his eyes fell to where his hand rested atop the table. He tried to be careful, but his nail polish had finally begun to chip, and he couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. He could probably just repaint them, right? There really wasn't any reason he couldn't. It wasn't like he was deluded enough to think that Marinette wouldn't lend him her polish if he asked. He just wasn't sure that he wanted to ask. No, he would probably just ask for her remover and wipe it off before it looked too decrepit. I hope I didn't embarrass myself too much or ruin it for anyone, he added, tearing his eyes away from his hands. I'm a little scared to ask. Oh, you were fine, Alia dismissed, and he relaxed a bit. You weren't the first one of us to accept one of those drinks. Basically, a rite of passage. You weren't any trouble, Marinette agreed. Oh, well, not too much trouble. A very manageable amount of trouble. He chuckled, rubbing at the nape of his neck. Great. At least you had fun, Nino snorted. A lot of fun, apparently. Adrian wasn't quite sure why Nino had said it with so much certainty, considering he hadn't been there. The look on his face must have communicated as such, because in a moment Nino was taking his phone out of his pocket and typing away at it. Alia showed me this, he explained with a laugh, leaning across the table to display his screen to Adrian. Laid out in the pixels before him was a picture of Adrian practically draped across Marinette's lap, smiling at the camera with a look just about as manic as the terrible one on his face when he tried the dress on. He was brandishing his hands to show off his nail polish for the camera, Marinette rolling her eyes above him. Her makeup was noticeably asymmetrical, as opposed to his, which looked nearly expertly applied with cat eyes, he blurted, and Marinette and Elia collectively groaned. He wasn't expecting a response that strong or synchronistic. A shared glance with an equally confused Nino didn't seem to add any insight. We know, Adrian. Cat eye. You said it and laughed about it 1,000 times that night. Alia snorted. Marinette was trying so hard to reel you in around everybody. I told them all that you just really, really, really like cats, she sighed. A laugh burst through his throat, and he found himself looking at the picture once again. Crazy grin aside, and even pun aside, he really liked the look of those cat eyes. You were so happy, though, Marinette added softly, so it was well worth it. Nino pulled back and re-pocketed his phone. I'm kind of sad I missed it, Nino snickered. It seems like I missed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see you totally shit-faced, dude. Adrian opened his mouth to tease him back, but was cut off by Marinette. Nino, she spat harshly. Adrian blinked and looked at Marinette, noticing the intensity of her glare. He looked back at Nino, alarmed, and Nino seemed just as, if not more, taken aback by the situation as Adrian felt. A cursory glance at Alia yielded the same results. Nino swallowed. Adrian couldn't blame him for being nervous. He certainly never envied anyone on the other side of Marinette's wrath. What? Don't call that. Her eyes widened, her resolution cracking. Adrian, that, she finished quietly. Huh? Nina was now looking at him, nervous, waiting for some kind of explanation. Adrian could do nothing but shrug. What? Nina asked cautiously. Shit-faced? No, not that, just Marinette's eyes flickered to Adrian's momentarily, nervous, like she was looking for something from him. He had no idea what. Her attention turned back down to her food, cheeks pink. Just, never mind, sorry. Dude? Ali asked carefully, looking right at him, and though there was no judgment in her gaze, she couldn't help but he couldn't help but feel like he was under some kind of investigation. Never mind, Marinette squeaked, shoving a bite of sandwich into her mouth. She continued, mouth full. Sorry. The scorching air nearly burnt his fingers as they combed distractedly through his locks. His eyes locked on the makeup on the counter. Marinette must have gone shopping. He finally turned the device off, his hair sufficiently dried, and set it aside. His careful hands reached forward, picking up and idly inspecting all the new products that she'd purchased. Adrian was no stranger to makeup, not in any sense. He grew up with makeup artists always at his side, after all. He was familiar with being powdered and swatched and painted, and even now he still often found himself wearing the occasional concealer to mask any dark circles under his eyes. So he poked through Marinette's makeup, out of mere curiosity, of course, just to test himself, perhaps, on how well he'd recognize it all. He saw concealer, mascara, foundation, blush, bronzer, setting spray, and eyeshadow and eyeliner. Lots of eyeliner, pencils and liquid and brown and black and even blue in all variety of brands. He wasn't too surprised. Marinette often enjoyed watching videos of people applying makeup to relax, and they were nearly always sponsored, so it makes sense if she'd been a bit influenced to make some purchases. This was more than he'd ever seen on their counter before, though, and certainly more variety than he'd ever seen her go out of her way to wear. Maybe she was going to try something new, to experiment with different looks. A smile tugged at his lips. He was always excited to see whatever new creative endeavor she decided to pick up. She was an artist in all ways, and a master at nearly any craft she decided to try her hand in. Seeing her express her creative chops in any way always had him blooming with adoration. Unfortunately, though, she might have gotten the wrong shade of foundation. It looked closer to his shade than hers, but maybe that was just a trick of the light. Before he even realized what he was doing, a liquid black eyeliner found its way into his hands. He played with it idly, twirling it between his fingers and absent-mindedly reading the label. It was brand new, completely unopened, still covered in a thin, disposable layer of plastic. He should put it back. He shouldn't mess with Marinette's stuff. But he was curious. He picked out a few of the other black liquid eyeliners from the pile and held them side by side. Which one was best? Why did he care? His fingernails, still mostly green because he hadn't been able to bring himself to ask for Marinette's nail polish remover yet, idly picked at the notched plastic. He should ask Marinette before opening her stuff, but she wasn't home right now, and what would he even ask if he did? Hey, Marinette, mind if I swatch your eyeliners to test which one I think is best? Out of pure curiosity. But also, what was the harm in it? Just one swatch, each on the back of his hand, out of curiosity, to see how the formulas compared. He would barely be wasting any of the ink. Maybe Marinette would notice that the plastic seals were gone, but surely she wouldn't be too upset, right? Maybe he could tell her his final verdict. Maybe she'd appreciate the information. Maybe it'd help to keep her from feeling overwhelmed by all the choices. He tore the plastic off of each of them and swatched them on the back of his hand, one by one. He was a bit entranced by how satisfying it felt to brush the ink on. Each one, except the third swatch, which he decided was easily the worst of the bunch, came out completely opaque. The blacks glistened in the light as they dried, and he twisted his hand back and forth to watch the sparkles as they gradually settled. The fifth swatch took the longest to dry. He counted that as a point against it. Once they all seemed dry, he brushed his finger carefully over the skin. He didn't press in very hard at all, but the first swatch still smudged considerably. Point against it. He pinched and rubbed his now black-stained fingers together in an attempt to rub off the ink, to no avail. One of Marinette's makeup wipes made quick work of it, though, and now that he had it in his hand, he figured he'd better clean it all up and be done with it. He appraised the swatches one last time. The sixth swatch was more of a dark grey than a pure black, which may have been intentional, but it was definitely a point deduction in his book. That left the second and fourth. They both performed gradually well on a formula level, as far as he could tell from the simple test, but the second's brush was much thinner than the fourth's, more difficult to apply a cat eye with. Point against it. He wiped the swatches off his hand and placed the eyeliners back where he'd found them, except he kept the winner in his hands, playing with it between his fingers, turning and tilting it. It felt wrong to put it away, just like all the others, when it had won. Besides, how could he confidently tell Marinette that it was the best, when he hadn't even given it a full test? It wasn't like he had anything better to do, anyway. He was home alone, the only human at least. All his work for the day was done, and he didn't have any plans. There was no harm in wasting some time away at the mirror. He twisted the cap back off and leaned in close to his reflection. Adrian may have been well familiar with makeup, but he'd never personally applied anything like eyeliner to himself before, and he was quickly realizing that it was harder than it looked. He'd never considered his dexterity particularly bad, but somehow applying a straight line seemed impossible. A quiet curse left his lips at the crooked wing, and he grabbed Marinette's makeup wipe to make quick work of it. He should give up now. He should give up. Consider it a lost cause. The eyeliner was great, after all. He knew that. There wasn't anything wrong with it. Only him. Against his better judgment, however, he tried again, this time supporting his elbow to steady its strokes. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't terrible. A bit thicker than he'd originally intended, because he'd had to overcorrect to cover some mistakes, but it still looked intentional, and he liked it. He moved on to the second eye. It took some fiddling. He had to wipe off the eye and start again a couple times, because getting both eyes to look symmetrical was fairly difficult when the first one had been more happy accident than anything. Once he was happy with how it looked, he took a step back, fully appraising his face in the mirror. Cat eyes. Meow, he said very eloquently, and then laughed. His hand pushed his hair back, his stupid grinning face staring right back at him, with eyeliner sharp enough to kill a man. Yeah, this felt right. He turned his head one way and the other, inspecting the way the makeup changed his face from different angles. He had half a mind to rifle through more of Marinette's makeup, maybe put on some lipstick or eyeshadow, but thought better of it. He'd gone through enough of her stuff already, and he didn't want to risk ruining his face when he was finally happy with it. He did put on some mascara and concealer, though, because his blonde lashes were standing out a bit too much among the eyeliner, and because he already had his own concealer, but he wasn't going to push his luck any further than that. And then, after a few long moments of continuing to stare at himself in the mirror, he had the dreadful thought. Now what? It wasn't enough. It didn't feel like enough. He liked how he looked right now, he felt happy, and he looked good, and his heart bloomed seeing his sharp eyes staring back at him. He didn't want to wipe it off, not yet. But now what? Well, he needed to get dressed, for one. He was still in only a towel, fresh from a shower, and I'd look good in a dress, spoke the back of his mind. Green eyes stared back at him, challenging him, just daring him to argue. He had no argument. He slipped out of the bathroom. He shuffled into the bedroom, tossing his towel aside and slipping into his underwear. Then he threw the closet open, and there, on a hanger, his dress. He hadn't had a chance to wear it since Marina completed it. He hadn't had an excuse. Even now, he wasn't sure he had one, not beyond a simple, I want to, and who's going to stop me? Once the garment was successfully shimmied into, and once he'd successfully tugged the zipper up, he lifted the front of his skirt and hurried back into the bathroom before he could second guess himself. And then he looked at himself in the mirror. A girl was looking back at him. A woman with killer eyeliner, a beautiful off-the-shoulder gown, up and pinkening cheeks. Yeah, that made sense. They certainly felt warm. She wasn't smiling this time, though. Instead, she simply stared, and he felt stricken by a familiar feeling that he'd never particularly been able to place until now. And she watched him, her green eyes wide as he mechanically raised a hand to his brow and pushed her golden locks aside. Roleplay. That's what she told herself, heart racing, as she sunk deeper into the movement. She was roleplaying right now. This was normal. Guys totally did this. There was nothing to dig into here, nothing to think too deep about. And then, as part of the totally normal, average, private cis guy roleplay, she stepped back from the mirror, trying as hard as she could to get a complete picture of herself without a full-length mirror. She'd have to leave the bathroom for one of those. She turned. She tried some of her well-memorized modeling poses. She looked at herself from all angles, appreciating the moment for what it was, enjoying seeing herself in this way as much as possible while she still could, before she'd be forced to stop. You look like a princess, Marinette's voice rang in her head, and she couldn't help but laugh, because she agreed, and she beamed. What are you doing? All of the warmth was doused in an ice water, and he spun around to face the origin of the sound. Plague simply stared at him, an incredulous tilt to his brow, like Adrien was doing something weird, like Adrien was doing something wrong, like he looked strange, like the dress was ill-fitting, like his makeup was poorly done, like he looked like a clown. If father could see you now, that abysmal, unkillable voice whispered. Nothing, Adrien croaked in answer, gripping his skirt. I don't know. Oh, bathrooms for cleaning, Plague huffed. Why have you been here so long? That wasn't the interrogation he'd been expecting. And well, technically, he hadn't been here that long. He had left briefly at one point to put the dress on. He supposed Plague hadn't noticed that. I Adrien tilted. Adrien tried. The words dying on his tongue before they ever had a chance to even live. Because he wasn't sure what to say. I'm hiding. He almost wanted to say, but that didn't make sense. Hiding from what? From who? The Kwamis? Marinette wasn't home right now, and even if she was, he wasn't sure he would have to hide from her. It just felt like a private thing, in a way. Like he was doing something dirty. Like he was doing something he shouldn't be. But it felt silly to say it like that. To imply that wearing makeup was bad. To imply that the dress that his lady had made specifically for him was wrong to wear. He didn't actually believe any of that. Maybe he just felt like he was keeping some sort of secret. A secret even he wasn't entirely sure about. Like he was the keeper of some classified documents that had already been blacked out. Or like keeping a secret identity. I don't know, he settled on saying, awkwardly adjusting the front of his bodice as if it weren't already perfect. Well, I need your help, Plague huffed. Miller got into my cambric stash again. Adrien raised a brow. You have more than enough to share. I most certainly do not. I do not share. Adrien sighed and shook his head, turning back towards the counter and grabbing a makeup wipe. Just give me a second to get changed. She's in my cheese as we speak, Plague wailed, flying forward. And Adrien hissed as his hair was tugged. You look fine. Let's go. He swiped the commie out of his hair. Okay, okay, Adrien scoffed, tossing the unused wipe aside. Fine. The Kwamis were out and about, tittering about the kitchen. A cursory glance at the oven clock told him that he had spent far longer in the bathroom than he thought. It was well past the time that Marinette usually fed the Kwamis. No wonder they were ratty. Sorry, guys, he apologized. shuffling over to the fridge and opening it, trying to ignore the fact that Dizzy and Ziggy emerged from the shelves once he had. He didn't know what they had been eating in there, but it was his fault for not feeding them sooner. I lost track of time. It's okay, Sass assured, as Adrian grabbed a large platter from the cabinet and began filling it with the personalized food they kept for each of them. In particular, the Swiss cheese for Milo to appease her away from Plag's draconic horde. Oh, Adrian, Dazzy chirped. You look so pretty. Oh, he swallowed, cheeks warm as he stepped back and bumped the fridge door closed with his hip. Thank you. The Guardian made that, right? Bark asked as she grabbed her peanut butter snack from the platter. He nodded, and the rest of the commies flitted over to take their respective snacks, including Milo, who had, as expected, emerged from Plag's cabinet, unperturbed by the hiss Plag shot her way. Your makeup is so pretty, she said, and his cheeks only burned hotter. Thanks, he said quietly. Pretty does not do it justice, Kalki huffed, taking her sugar cubes. He looks elegant. He couldn't hide his smile. Like a queen, Pollen sighed happily between slurps of honey. Or a princess, he corrected with a smirk, whatever lingering shame he had fading away. He set the platter down on the table. Oh, oh! Roar cheered. Do a twirl, do a twirl. Skirts are always so fun when they twirl. Oh! He hadn't thought of that, but he had been in the bathroom at the time. He hadn't had the space. But he did now. He wasn't confined to the bathroom anymore. He glanced down at his long skirt, then back up at all the commies staring at him, watching him expectantly. He smiled and made his way away from the furniture, allowing himself the room to put on a proper show for them. He rowed back, eyeing the commies one final time with a smile, and did a long twirl. The green fabric of the skirt flew up and out, spinning with him, nearly shining under the light, and he felt a rush. And as he slowed to a stop, the skirt swishing back into place, the commies did a collective cheer. So pretty, Ziggy awed. Elegant, Orico corrected. Didn't we establish that? Yeah, like a princess, Stomp said. Desi flew over to his phone, long abandoned on the table. She swiped at the screen, and he was about to be concerned about the fact that she apparently knew his passcode when music started to play through the living room stereo. Do it again, she called. And, well, Adrian had never been one to disappoint. He twirled again. The racing of her heart, the aching of her grin, the rush of euphoria as the commies all cheered their approval. It was all so much, so wonderful, and she couldn't help but wonder why she hadn't done this sooner, why she'd ever felt ashamed. Once her skirt had settled, she curtsied towards the applause. Why, thank you, you're all too kind. Woo! Raw cheered, doing flips in the air. I want to dance too. Yeah, let's dance, Dazzy called, twirling in her spot in the air. More Kwamis joined in, and Adrian laughed. Or Adrienne? She wasn't sure. Maybe Marinette had had a point about the name thing, but she didn't mind Adrian. Adrian was just as good to her. Maybe Adrian was a boy, but she didn't see why Adrian couldn't be a girl too. She decided not to think too hard about the way that last thought could possibly fit into the roleplay excuse, instead making her way over to the table and grabbing her phone. The music wasn't loud enough. Marinette sighed as she ascended the steps of her apartment building. Finally, she could turn in for the day. Maybe she would listen to some podcasts while she worked on the other dress that she'd started on, or wind down with some video games. Making her way down the hall, she patted around in her purse for her keys for a solid few moments, until Tiki finally had mercy on her and placed them in her hand. The faint sound of music, muffled by the walls, wafted through the hall, but it wasn't until she approached her door that she realized it was coming from her own apartment. She could just barely make out some voices through the volume of the music and the wood of the door. Raw, Zupa, Orico, and Adrian's laughter. Myrna couldn't help but brighten up. She picked out the key from the chain and tried to jam it into the lock, but the old lock was giving her some resistance. She fiddled and fiddled, groaned, removed the key to shove it right back in, and eventually the lock had mercy on her. Pushing the door open and stepping inside, a dozen small pairs of eyes landed on her. She shut the door and shirked off her jacket and shoes. Guardian, Long greeted, as many of the other commies continued dancing. How are your teeth? Oh, do you still have them? Zupa asked, doing a few flips. Did they take your teeth? Huh? It was just a routine cleaning, Renette said, making her way to the kitchen to pour herself a glass of water. The scene before her was almost what she'd expected from what she'd heard through the door. The music was blaring through the stereo, and the commies were rowdy as ever. But where's Adrien? Huh? Dazzy opened her eyes, no longer entranced by the groove. Oh, where'd he go? He was just here. He left, Flag said. Did you get any more teeth? Miller asked, flying up to Marinette with hopeful eyes. You bought more, right? Marinette simply shook her head, looking to the entrance of the hallway, but the angle from where she stood didn't allow her to see much. Why did they leave? She had heard them, right there, and she was at the door. Surely they heard her jingling the lock. It wasn't like them to not greet her. She drank her porter, and as she half-heartedly tried to explain dentists to the commies, she heard the unmistakable sound of a door down the hall slamming shut. She frowned. Do you want to dance, Guardian? Pollen asked. She sighed. I don't think I'm in the mood. Feel free, though. Stepping carefully toward the hall, she peered down its length. Light spilled out from beneath the bathroom door, and she stared at it for a solid few moments. The door opened, and her eyes snapped up. Adrien poked her head out and saw her, her eyes widening in a flash that was quickly replaced with a polite smile. They stepped out and carefully shut the bathroom door behind them. Marinette, you're back. Yeah, she said, smiling and trying to will herself into believing that they didn't already know that. They made their way over to her arm. They made their way over to her, arms open, and she happily accepted the hug, adding on a peck to their lips. Hi. They chuckled, pulling back to look down at her with those affectionate eyes of theirs. How'd it go? Fine, she said. Everything's good. I'm just very clean now. That's good, they said, and she noticed then how pink their cheeks were. They averted their gaze from hers for a moment, and she took note of a small smidge of black on the side of their head, beside their eye. She knew that smudge. She'd worn that smudge quite a few times herself, whenever she'd missed a spot wiping makeup off. Adrien, there you are! Oh, Dazzy whined, and Marinette turned to see her at the mouth of the hallway. You're not so elegant anymore. She turned her gaze back to Adrien's stricken one, their eyes wide and face pale. They clapped their hands together, their face schooled right back into a smile. Anyway, Marinette, you hungry? Marinette's gaze fell down to their clothes, to the pair of jeans and rumpled skirt. The shirt was on backwards. Marinette was an idiot. She knew Adrien too well. She could recognize the anxiety that they were trying to mask, and she knew that Adrien could change in and out of clothes quickly, and with practice, professional ease. If they put their shirt on wrong, they must have really been in a hurry. A hurry to change out of something more elegant. A hurry to wipe off some makeup. She wanted to be happy, really, that they'd taken the bait. She'd made that dress for them, and she'd bought that makeup for them too. She wanted to be happy to know that it wasn't for naught, and she remembered hearing their mirth through it all. She wanted to be happy for them, wanted to be happy that her plan was working, that they were doing some exploring, but it hurt, a twinge, that they were hiding it from her. Did they think she'd be upset? What could she possibly do, more than she already had, to communicate to them that she never would be? She'd told them time and time again, and she'd Love them no matter what. She even made that dress. But still, my lady? The corner of her mouth twitched as she attempted to smile. Sure. They smiled, and she mentally kicked herself for ever thinking subtlety was an option. Oh, that was a long one. I did so, like, you probably saw them, but, like, I did two really short ones before this, and I was like, oh, I'm doing good. I'll be able to make long ones. No, I'll be able to do a whole bunch today. No, never mind, half an hour. I need to drink water. You can probably hear it in my voice when I stopped being able. I just messed with the thing. Anyway, yeah, I need to drink water. But hopefully you enjoyed that. That was fun. I love this story so much. I saw someone talking about it on Tumblr earlier, and I was like, oh, cool, I'm reading that one right now. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. If you want more, leave a comment. If you have any one shots that you want me to read, or honestly, short ish series, like, how many words does this one have? So I can actually set it. Yeah, under 20,000 words, and I will read it. Honestly, yeah. If it's under 20,000 words, I will read it if you ask me to. I should put that on my community tab. The words are gone for me. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!